And I want to just have a little round of applause for our sponsors. Who's here? I don't know who's still here and who's back from lunch now. And I'm Melanie McWhorter. I'm the Executive Director at Historic Santa Fe Foundation. I know we were having 2 board directors. I think Larry Goods here, our outgoing, terming out board chair. And Greg Walkie did sign up, but I don't think Greg's back yet. So I'm not sure if he's here. But so where is Historic Santa Fe Foundation? So we're located at 545 Canyon Road. We have a historic garden, a welcome center, with a history room, a local gift shop, art exhibition space, along with the adjacent Thaw Education Center at the Edwin Brooks House. And the initial impetus of this symposium started with the idea to convene and introduce preservation organizations in Santa Fe and the state of New Mexico. So last year we had speakers from Old Santa Fe Association, the city's land use, AIA Santa Fe, and the Historic Preservation Office. And some of these questions were a part of my questions last year in my presentation, and I think a lot of them are still relevant this year. So what does preservation mean to you? How are history and preservation important to Santa Fe? Why should they be important? Where is history's place in today's world? And how should this change with consideration of modern concerns or issues like climate change, inclusion, or affordable housing? And what can governments and nonprofits do when considering these questions? Some of these are meant for reflection, some are meant for discussion, some are addressed today by some of the panels that we have had and will have. I thought them worthy of revisiting, and they may not be all questions that we need to answer, but we need to they provided a good basis for some of this year's thoughts and planning. So this is our mission. So why did I think the Historic Santa Fe Foundation was the organization to present this diverse set of panels that seems to be out of the realm of history and preservation? So I want to briefly look at our mission and break it down a little bit into some parts. So we educate the public about Santa Fe's history. While not an exhaustive list, here you see examples of our education programs, including our high school research fellows, this year with one illustrated with a Mandela High School student who's a junior, incredible project, Flavia Fernandez, on the research topic of transformation of indigenous mythologies in New Mexico. We also have the history room with narratives about El Zaguan's land building and its inhabitants, and we also have docent tours of El Zaguan and the Brooks House. I see us as a catalyst for discussions, and our buildings are places for exposure to and presentations of new and unfamiliar disciplines, techniques, ideas, or concepts through presentations, public and private conversations, and exposure to new research or deeper discussions of familiar topics. Now, we also preserve, protect, and promote historic properties. A few brief examples of this include preservation easements that protect elements of homes in perpetuity, like the illustrated Bishop Everett Jones house is pictured there. We also do the Register of Properties Worthy of Preservation, and it's a rigorous research listing program. And we have the Thaw Education Center, which we currently have a Dorothy Stewart exhibition up right now that opened last evening of a lot of her woodcuts. It's absolutely outstanding, and we're doing a salon talk, I think, on June 4th. So if you want to sign up for that with her great-grandniece. And we also preserve, protect, and promote diverse cultural heritage. I like the definition that I found by Elena Franchi in a publication for the Center for Public Art History. Cultural heritage often brings to mind artifacts, historical monuments, and buildings, as well as archaeological sites. But the concept of historical heritage is even wider than that and has gradually grown to include all evidence of human creativity and expression, either as individual objects or as collections. Today, towns, underwater heritage, and the natural environment are also considered part of cultural heritage, since communities identify themselves with the natural landscape. This and other concepts of the idea of cultural heritage give us a basis for cultural education. For us, historically, these have been very much related to historic buildings and expressions of creativity in the past. The National Advisory Council on Preservation states, historic preservation has become a fundamental tool for strengthening American communities. It is proven to be an effective tool for a wide range of public goods, including small business incubation, affordable housing, sustainable development, neighborhood stabilization, city alliterative, revitalization, job creation, promotion of the arts and culture, small town renewal, heritage tourism, economic development, and others. We see at the national level, along with states and municipalities, there's been an ongoing movement to move preservation to consider the wider social considerations of the community. So why now? Sarah Bronin, former chair of the National Advisory Council for Historic Preservation, interrelates the issues connected with establishing and amending zoning codes, with those food production, transportation, affordable housing, homelessness, density living, and many other topics. Here in Santa Fe, we're looking towards changes that can be monumental to how the city expands, connects to the county and the surrounding areas, and keeps its connection to Santa Fe's sense of place and people. The rewriting of the general plan and its included land use code. Listed here are some of the themes from the 1999 plan, and we can clearly draw some of the connections to the previous categories under preservation, including affordable housing, economic diversity, character, sustainable growth. Many use disparate terms, but essentially there's some of the same issues and topics. Historic structures and their use or reuse can be part of the discussion. Today, we're going to explore one, adaptive reuse, with James Horn, who's up front here, who will be on our next panel. And his examples and others can be as outstanding models for solving some of our issues. Saving and reusing old buildings act as a means of carbon sequestering. Reusing structures and utilizing processes and code requirements like deconstruction, much like in the city of San Antonio, allow materials from historic or other houses to live again. According to the EPA, deconstruction is a process of carefully dismantling buildings to salvage components for reuse and recycling. While we want to retain our buildings as much as possible, this practice provides a new life for historic materials and reduces waste, and is one of the topics that is researched and can be executed at a city level. Now we're looking at the 50-year rule and the aging and limited housing supply. Many homes are reaching the 50-year mark, a metric established by the National Register for Historic Places as one of the accepted criteria to designate a home as historic. The National Association of Home Builders states that the median age of the owner-occupied house climbed to 41 years in the year 2023, up from 31 in 2005. While I do not have the Santa Fe numbers in front of me now, we likely have a similar or expansive numbers regarding the aging of homes in Santa Fe. There's no denying the need for homes and affordable homes. The numbers, according to one of our speakers, Miles Conway, on the first panel, in the New Mexican article in October 2025 states that we need about 5,000 homes in the city and upwards of 10,000 in the county. Another interesting set of numbers that struck me lately, specific area of Albuquerque. I went to a home builders conference down there with a nationwide developer was working on single family homes. The current cost estimate before even starting construction for a 3-bedroom, 3-bath, approximately 1,600 square foot residence was about $189,000. And the final cost approximately at $297,000 to $313,000, with the median home sales price in the area of about $297,000. This is in the area where the median income is about $788,000 from a Zondo stat from 2019. And note that is a median income for the broader Albuquerque community. This gives a picture of the expense associated with single-family homes, new builds in the state, and some of the questions the numbers raise about what to do with the affordability issues, density building, community development, job creation, along with wage increases, short-term rentals, sustainability practices, and a wide range of other associated topics. Thinking of development and the rising costs, climate issues, and cultural preservation, we must ask, how can we protect these historic properties, and how can we best reuse our available historic properties? How can they be used to support both the public and private good? Here, Historic Santa Fe Foundation provides the opportunity for open and exploratory dialogue and preservation. We hope to inspire curiosity about our common and personal sense of place. A study on economic impacts of historic preservation by place economics states that the housing supply shortfall is wide-ranging, and that collaboration among public service institutions, developers, financial institutions, philanthropic organizations, and other private sector is essential. They state the preservation movement needs to look at how to meet the housing needs of tribes and disadvantaged or displaced, is some of the terms that you heard earlier today, and underserved communities. They must explore the links between historic designation and housing affordability, and between historic designation and displacement of residents in disadvantaged and underserved communities and in communities with environmental justice concerns. And study the positive climate impacts of rehabilitating historic buildings for housing, including decarbonization, improved operational energy efficiency, and climate resilience. This is a long and varied list with many stakeholders in the process, as we've witnessed some today. We need to have constructive, thoughtful, and engaged conversations with other members of the community. Preservation is not a siloed discipline, and current issues, including housing, food, and transportation, as just a few examples, are connected to the diverse cultural heritage and history of Santa Fe. We must preserve the past and always look towards the future. So thank you. And now I'm going to switch over into the other mode. So now we're going to have panel 3. Ooh, almost just perfectly on time. I'll do the logistics thing again. Most of you know where the bathroom is. No food in here and water. And then we'll do questions at the end. Shawn, are you here? I'm here. Yay. Okay, great. So Shawn Evans is our moderator. And for this panel, I'm not going to do introductions. I kind of was at the, as each panel would like for to be introduced. So Shawn is here, and then we have James Horn, and then Danielle. Yay, fantastic. Our whole entire panel is here. So we're going to have, okay,
excellent.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming today. I'm Shawn Evans. I'm a principal with Mass Design Group, Model of Architecture Serving Society. You heard from my colleague Mayra earlier. I'm pleased to be honored to be moderating this panel on developing and designing for community, culture, and climate. My good friend James Horn is gonna follow me, and then new friend Danielle Wilson will talk after that. So I'm just gonna set the stage for this discussion. And importantly, preservation is a form of design. We don't think about it often that way, but it absolutely is. So I thought I would start by giving you all a brief history of preservation. I'm gonna make it brief. Y'all know Victor Hugo. Victor was one of the first people to really think about preservation and write about it. We all know Notre Dame, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Not that one, but Victor Hugo, the Notre Dame de Paris, this remarkable book is actually about historic preservation, about Notre Dame, which was facing a different threat than it faced recently. Sadly, in this picture, remarkable text. I've never seen a picture of him looking very happy And he was very quickly followed by these two fellows, Viollet Leduc and John Ruskin, who found themselves on opposite ends of the earliest preservation argument. I was really delighted, Melanie, when you introduced this morning and said, we're not all going to think the same way. We're not all going to agree, but we can agree to have spirited discussions, and that's certainly what these two people did, staring right through Victor. Viollet Leduc was the first person to really advocate. I don't think he came up with this, but he was called the head of the scrapers, and John Ruskin was the head of the anti-scrapers. And what that meant was Viollet Leduc this is before any kind of academic program in preservation, before many academic programs in architecture. And Viollet Leduc advocated for restoration, of bringing things back to the spirit which they wanted to be but never actually were. He interestingly designed much of Notre Dame. We think about it as a 900-year-old building, but much of it was his work, things he just made up. And Ruskin was the head of the anti-scrapers, and his is really about, like, let's not screw up buildings by, let's leave them dirty. They change, they tell stories. And so I like to think of Victor sitting in here between, can we all just get along? I just want to save these things that my community loves. And Viollet, this is his actual quote, to restore an edifice is not to maintain it, repair it, or remake it. It's to reestablish it in a complete state that it perhaps never existed at any time. Now, we read that and say, clearly he's being critical, but this was the way he thought. John Ruskin, on the other hand, believes that restoration is the most total destruction which a building can suffer. And he famously loved, this is his drawing, he's a remarkable draftsman, not an architect, but loved the architecture kind of through its degradation and dirt, and reveals the stories of human life. We don't have to worry about those kind of arguments here in Santa Fe, clearly, right? We're all about authenticity and scholarship. Here we are, here's the Palace of the Governors in this remarkable 1912 exhibit, the New Old Santa Fe, in which at this point in time, Santa Feans just start to completely remake the city to an ideal of what it might have been, not what it was. A few other things that I wanted to help set the stage with for a good discussion of design, the relationship between design and preservation. One of the really fascinating things about a place like Santa Fe is that it is vernacular. That's a big word, but it basically means there ain't no architect involved. This was like Taos Pueblo, a place that just kind of grew with the evolution of a society. This was very much Santa Fe. If you look all those very old photographs of Santa Fe, there's no architects running around. People just literally pulled the adobes out of the earth. Here we have the inn at Loretto, which is very much designed, but kind of designed to be masquerading as vernacular. Importantly, most recently, there's been a lot of discussion about the difference between tangible preservation and intangible preservation. We heard a lot this morning, and hopefully we're going to continue hearing more and more and more about this in Santa Fe, about the importance of perpetuating culture rather than just preserving stuff. When we talk about tangible preservation, we're talking about preservation of things, objects and buildings, things that you can wrap your hands around, versus intangible culture is heritage, it is tradition, it is song, it is dance, it is basketry. It can be architecture, but it's about the act of making buildings, less so than the buildings themselves. Of course, we know that our adobe heritage is inherently fugitive, which means it wants to disappear, it wants to return to the earth. If you talk to Pueblo people, many of them believe that those buildings are alive and they're supposed to return to the earth. So preservation in many places in this context is counterintuitive. This is a remarkable diagram from UNESCO that has been focusing a lot on intangible heritage. And yeah, you see that architecture is a little piece of this, but I'm convinced this is what New Mexico needs to be focused on, less so than just bricks and sticks. More brief history of preservation at odds. I kind of came up with that expression. I like that. Thinking about the reconstruction of Europe after World War I or World War II, very focused on the thing, versus some of like Asian traditions in Japan, the Ise Shrine, a place I've not yet been, but this building is 900 years old, but they rebuild it every 20 years on the adjacent site. And so there is a tangible thing there, of course, but what's important about that activity, it's not the thing, it's the act of construction and the knowledge that's transferred. Here's two other fellows that were interested in preservation and found themselves at odds with each other. John Gaumim and Alexander Gerard. They found themselves on the opposite sides of this, the debate in the mid to late 1950s about the design ordinance. But you know what? They were incredibly close friends. And they collaborated after that. Now, John Gaumim did not design St. John's College, but he orchestrated it. And his former partners designed the Peterson Student Center, which I've just expanded. And Meme encouraged Gerard to be hired to create all sorts of wonderful interiors in the building, including this small section of a 130-foot long mural, which has just been magnificently restored. And so we can have opposite opinions, but we can treat each other with kindness. We can be nice, and we should be nice. And I think there's no better place in the world to push preservation where it needs to be than right here. And it's going to be about people, less so than bricks and sticks. Now, there's a lot of discussion going on in town about the rewrite of the Land Development Code and the preservation chapter in it. A lot of discussion of should we adopt the Secretary of the own thing. One of the things about Santa Fe is we were very early in preservation, in the history of preservation, and so this didn't exist in 1957. It certainly didn't exist in 1912. But here we do see a spectrum between scraping and not scraping. There are 4 standards within the Secretary of the Interior standards. We generally use these words interchangeably: preservation, restoration, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. They mean very different things in the standards. Restoration and reconstruction are definitely scraping, and it's about putting something back to the exact way that it used to be. Is that what happened at the Palace of the Governors between 1909 and 1912? Absolutely not. That is a fantasy. Preservation is right in the middle. It's about, really, if you can, don't even touch it. Don't do anything to it. Just repair it, maintain it, keep it going. Rehabilitation is the only one of these standards that teaches us how to allow the important characteristics of a place to be maintained while a building receives a new use. So I think there's many people in the room that agree with me. There's probably some people that don't, and that's okay. I firmly believe that preservation should be a search for authenticity over nostalgia. I'm becoming this phrase, heritage is a verb. I didn't come up with this. This really bothers a lot of people. Heritage isn't a verb, it's a noun. It's a verb. It's a collective, contemporary action through which community or communities carries its or their past into the future. I choose culture and people over commodification and bricks and sticks. I could spend a whole 3 hours explaining this graphic. This is the history of Santa Fe. Ogopoga, a place that existed for many, many years. And we see here the relationship of heritage and history and control and power and nostalgia, particularly with these remarkable expositions in which the people of New Mexico were forced to live in a zoo. But this is all part of the buildup of the nostalgia enterprise here in Santa Fe, and how we've gotten into the situation we're in. I was really intrigued looking at this morning to see that it's now been 114 years since 1912 that we've been operating in this mode of preservation in Santa Fe. That's longer than the duration between the time of the arrival of the Spanish and the Pueblo Revolt. Time for another revolt? But we have this amazing opportunity in front of us with the general plan and the land development code to get this right. So let's do it. Of course, here we find ourselves today, preservation at a crossroads. There is growing division in town about the vision for what should happen here. We are facing existential crises of climate change, of affordability, and social justice. And we have this remarkable opportunity. I've been wanting to do this for so long, but how cool is this? So this is the I can never remember how to pronounce this guy's name. Euricha 1766 map. Like, there's not even 100 buildings in Santa Fe. Urrutia, thank you. Look at that. Incredible. But of course, our heritage goes back much, much deeper. If you, I don't know if it's still up, but there's a remarkable exhibit at the O'Keeffe Museum called Tewa Nange, Tewa Country, in response to Miss Georgia's horribly offensive statement that it's O'Keeffe Country. And we have this incredible layering of place names and water that is still here, that Santa Fe is Ogapoga, which means white shell water place in the Tewa language. And these people, this heritage is still here. We are blessed with layers of history that no other place in the country can rival. And I firmly believe this should guide us as we think about preservation. Also hoping that we get a little bit of chance in the panel to talk about sustainability. I thought we were done arguing, is the greenest building something like that, or is it something like this? It's both, but the greenest building is the building that already exists, of course. And these arguments still happen. Should we preserve all of the windows on the white building? I actually firmly believe that we should. Insulated windows are among the greatest crimes. Yeah, they're good for energy, but guess how long that sealant between those two panes of glass lasts? Where's that glass going when it fails? In the landfill. Most contemporary windows are garbage. They are designed to be replaced and be thrown away. A quality wood window like those wood windows, yeah, it would have been expensive to repair them. They're never going in the landfill. They're repairable forever. And much, much better from a carbon perspective. Speaking of, much of sustainability today is about carbon emissions rather than energy. And we've studied this at Mass. These are carbon calculations. I'm not a scientist, nor do I play one on TV. But we can see that a traditional adobe building has results in considerably less carbon emissions than a typical this represents a wood frame stuccoed home, something here like in Santa Fe. And we calculate the emissions from all of the carbon that goes into the sorry, I have Parkinson's disease and it just hit me. Give me a sec. Anyway, I'll go on. Preservation is for people. Fundamentally, we got to quit arguing this. And I want everybody to get your phone out right now and shoot this QR code. This will take you to the relevancy guidebook that was produced by Landmarks Illinois. It is the most remarkable publication on preservation that goes through how we can transform the future of preservation. I'm just going to leave you with a little bit. I'm not going to read all this. 10 reasons why preservation is in the midst of a relevancy crisis. I'm just going to read the last one. Despite widespread recognition that the preservation field needs to change, there's little consensus about what to do. However, if we do not begin to change, decisions will be made for us and not by us. It's time to move beyond assessment and into action. Now, what I don't like about this, and what I don't like about all of those people that I showed you their photographs of, is that they're all white men. This was actually written by a white woman. But they're people in power. And we have not figured out how to empower the citizens of Santa Fe to control their destiny. Our job as architects, as heritage professionals, is to put ourselves in service to the community in which we live. And it's not about what I think. It's not about what you think. It's about what this incredible plurality of people that live in this beautiful city think. So the book goes through, this pamphlet goes through incredible things. So here's 10 ideas to make preservation more relevant. And there's just incredible stuff in here. I'm not going to read it. But you all got your QR codes, right? And with that, put it back on. There we go. Hopefully that works. It worked for me this morning. Anyways, thank you all. I'm going to turn it over to James, and we'll hear about his work around New Mexico and other places. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? Have a good lunch? Yeah. All right. I bought somebody lunch that didn't bring their wallets. He was going to be in trouble. All right, well, I'm James Horn. I'm the AI New Mexico president this year, and I'm also the president and principal architect at Spears Horn Architects here in Santa Fe. I've got two hats. I believe strongly in advocating for architects' rights and for our built world. So as AI New Mexico president, we're out in DC this February fighting for and recommending to all of our representatives and senators to preserve buildings, or to go through the proper process of preserving buildings, and to support freedom of design, and also to bring housing to America in a better way. So I think everybody heard us loud and clear. I'm not sure if everybody does back there, but we're trying to make a difference. And we also had a conference in April that was a great conference, and we had our very own Miles Conway on one of the panels. I don't know if he's still here. But we had a housing panel down there that was great. So as Spears Horn Architects, we are a modern regional architecture firm. We like minimal, modern architecture. We preserve buildings. We do a lot of preservation. We do healthy buildings. We support buildings that are sustainable. And we have a thriving office right now and doing some really great projects. I think we have a project that's in Trend magazine that's down in Carlsbad, so we work all over the state. I went to UNM for undergrad and then worked in Albuquerque. I've been in New Mexico since the late 80s, so I've kind of been going back and forth, getting degrees and working in different places. But I've been here for quite a long time. After UNM and working in Albuquerque, at Predocs and other firms down there, I went to Rice School of Architecture, and that was let me switch this here. That was a very exciting time to be at Rice. And if anybody knows where Rice is or not is, it's in Houston, Texas, and there's no zoning. There's no regulations really per se in Houston. But it was a great time to be at Rice. There was, I'm coming from the sort of post-punk architecture in Albuquerque. Deconstructivism was really hot, and it was kind of passing behind us. So at Rice, it was all about looking at architecture through a different lens of things outside of architecture. So things like sound and light, health and materials and the city were really important things. And I was looking at Donald Judd, Robert Irwin, looking at scrims and how they could be integrated into buildings. And truly the craftsmanship is important to me in any type of architecture. And we had people like Bruce Mao was there, Sanford Quinter. We had Enrique Morales, Spanish architect, who came and spoke to us. And his motto was, Mies van der Rohe is less is more. I'll get it straight here. And he said, my motto is more or less. So that was kind of what was going on at the time. Not being so rigorous about things, but to open up your mind to the possibilities. And also he mentioned that he traced every Le Corbusier building in the Over. So he was totally fascinated with Le Corbusier, which I think is just great to trace somebody's work. I do that if you're an architect. So this is a little booklet that I made when I was at Rice, and it was called Dwelling in the Fringe, and it was kind of a combination of buildings that I lived in Albuquerque. I lived in a couple different warehouses, lived in a grocery store, and this is all to kind of the grand experiment to discover how things can be built into spaces, which is kind of the point of this talk today, is talking about adaptive reuse and how we can look at space in a different way, which to me, architecture is a lot about space and the people in it rather than what it looks like. I think first and foremost, it's about the people inhabiting the buildings. So that is critical to me. So this book had some projects in Seattle, and there's a project in Shreveport. These are all sort of people that I knew, and I knew that they're living in these sort of fringe spaces. But this is just one little quick example. This is originally a tortilla factory on Old Coors in Albuquerque, and we lived inside of one half of it and then parked in the other side. And there were no windows except for a skylight. It was one big open space. So after being a tortilla shop, it was a wood furniture shop and then an auto detailing shop. So we all parked over here and then lived on this side. So there were these sort of cubicles, and I designed this little cubicle, never built it. I moved out, but it was an experiment of kind of looking at pod architecture, and then we parked over here, and there's a giant barn door. But this is kind of an example of repurposing, reprogramming an existing building, kind of see what the discovery is there. And when I first came to Santa Fe, I worked on the Lannan Foundation Meeting House, which was the old Congregational Church on Metropolitan Avenue, which is now Reed Street. And this is from the bird's eye view, which everybody probably knows of, from 1882. And then there's a Sanborn insurance map from 1885. This was part of the campus of UNM. People probably don't know, but UNM was actually started up here before it went to Albuquerque. And there was the church and then the schoolhouse. And it was started by the Congregational Church before it moved. So this building has a lot of history. It's a pretty incredible building. It's a three brick thick walls. It was, of course, a church, and it was a residence and a meat shop, which probably explains this little addition on the front. And then it became an art gallery. And the art gallery went upstairs, and they ran steel I-beams through the building. So there was a lot of damage that had happened to this building when we got to it. And I will just say that this is the first time I met Mac Watson, because on all these kind of projects, I like to kind of bring people out and talk to them and find out what their opinions are. And I've had a lot of conversations with Jake Barrow and Mac Watson, and of course Beverly Spears, just to discover some of the things they may know about things and about how to deal with some of the restoration and rebuilding of some of the buildings. Anderson and Associates did the construction. Lannan Foundation was the client, and they were just incredible clients. And one issue that we had was that they had this pile of program that they wanted to have in this building. So it had to be a art gallery, it had a meeting room, and then, as everybody probably knows, it was the dining room for readings and conversations. So after the readings and conversations, they would come here and have dinner. So it had a warming kitchen and restrooms, and then we had a garden that was in the back. So it was a pretty exciting project to explore these ideas. But one idea was putting some of the auxiliary program in the middle, and then you walk around. Another idea was to put it on the perimeter, and then you go through, and there could possibly be buildings in the back, or a wall in the back is what we ended up with. But we were looking at what was going on, because they cut the trusses and they put these I-beams in. I mean, the thing was kind of a mess, but there were these walls that were ending up around here. So there were some structures inside that was a part of the architecture that was there. And then there are these traces of ceilings and different things that we discovered as we sort of pulled everything back. And of course, we took the front off because that was definitely not historical. And then we refurbished all of the wood that was the door and the windows. Those are the holes of the steel I-beams. We put the windows back the way they're originally were, because we actually could find pieces of them kind of cut out in different parts of the building. And then the whole back of the building focused on the garden in the back. So this becomes this more modern move with glass that's in the back. So the whole point was to look back to the fountain and through the aspen trees. They would have a lot of events in the back, and this was originally going to be a wall, and we're going to build it this high. But this is one thing with H-board. The staff went out and measured all the walls in the neighborhood and said we could do a 49-inch wall. And it's the back of Andiamo, so it's like, we're not doing a 49-inch wall and going to see Andiamo. So So we propose to do a inhabitable building. So we have storage, we have a fireplace, and a fountain, and bancos, and skylights. There's a lot of things that's in this building in the back. So. And then that's the sort of final plan with this inhabitable building in the garden. And there was a scrim that came in, part of the inspiration from Robert Irwin. So some of those pictures you saw earlier, there was a ceiling that was flat on top and then it came down. So a lot of this was to create kind of this trace of the existing ceiling that was in there. And then you can also look up and see the history of the building with the brick. And then there was this whole play of light inside and acoustic panels. So you could turn on the light from the bottom and the ceiling was opaque or transparent. And then the other project I was going to talk about is the Santo Domingo Trading Post, which we won the award on. And when we got there, it looked like this. There was a fire in 2001 that completely burned down the trading post, which was built in 1922. There was a older trading post warehouse from 1880s in the middle, and then this is a restaurant that was built on in 1922. And it was operated as a mercantile trading post since the 20s into the 40s, and I believe in the mid-90s it closed down. And then sometime after that there was the fire. But a lot of this is working with Native American housing consultants, Vanyu, Pat Taylor. We had this incredible team that got the award, and all woven through the project was Jake Barrow. I'm not sure if there he is right there. He was involved in this. So it was an incredible project, rebuilding it. We built it in 2 phases because there was a magic $500,000 first phase, and then they got more money the second phase. But it's a 2-story adobe structure. This is the repurposing of program here. The original had a basement storage with an elevator shaft with the whole trading post up above it with decks that went around. And then at some point a garage was added. So we planned to do the restrooms in the elevator shaft, close off the basement, use this for storage mechanical to kind of pull it away from the historic building. And the first phase, all this got closed off because they couldn't afford to build this. The second phase, all this went away and the deck was built all the way back. And see if I'm not forgetting something. It's on the National Register. It's right near the Rail Runner station. So the whole idea was to create this as a warming kitchen, cafe. People could get off the train, come here, eat, spend time in Domingo, which is a part of Santo Domingo. It was in a film. These were really the only images we had. Is right as we were submitting construction documents that all these images appeared, unfortunately, but we were fairly close with this post and beam decking that went around. But you can see why there might have been a fire. It's pretty wild in there. So. But we have this eating area, open, flexible area. We're trying to create a very powerful community space for the Pueblo, and I think it's been used quite a bit for that, but I'm not sure where it's at these days. So. There was adobe making with the community. Ricardo Cate was there a lot, and Ricardo Cate and his son painted the whole murals on the facade, so they're heavily involved. Native American housing consultant, we tore down the garage because it was like uncore-filled CMU block, he built the fireplace and did a big barbecue. So it was just a fun project to work on, very exciting. So, and then this is the finished mural that Ricardo and his son did. There's a lot of politics going on in this project. I think we had a couple governorships that passed through this project, but pretty exciting project. And then this is just the facade. It's all open behind it. And then I'll just close with this project that we're working on now is in Ribera, which is the old Santa Fe Trail went across the Pecos River here and came through Ribera, San Miguel, and we're working for San Miguel land grant. They have this building over here that's pretty dilapidated. It's a 3 rooms. The wood was dated to 1830s, and the plan is to restore this, stabilize it, because it's not in great shape right now, and use it as a cultural feature in that area, and they want to expand it out to more things in that general area. And we're hopefully going to get Yvonne Yu and Pat Taylor on this project. We're talking right now, and as always, we love having Jake involved. He's not far from this project, so yeah, we're excited about this one. So thank you very much, and we'll see you at the panel.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. And I've got to say that I'm honored to be standing up here with the folks that I've heard from today. I think there's a lot of takeaways that I'm already kind of thinking about as I'm going to share one particular project that I've worked on. But before I dive in, my name is Danielle Wilson. I work with a firm called Site Southwest. I'm a planner and project manager there. We do both planning and landscape architecture work, so while we work closely alongside many of those architects and folks that we're hearing from earlier today, we're thinking a lot more about those spaces in between, the spaces around the buildings, the spaces in between, and how people are engaging with that and living and using that space. So hopefully can offer some complementary ideas to those that have already been shared. But we're going to take a little trip down to Mesilla for this one. So I was glad to hear Pat Taylor's name come up, because we were really fortunate to work with him as well for some of the work that we did in Mesilla. So wanted to open up with a couple questions that we had coming into this project, which was a comprehensive plan. So a few steps back into that planning stage. But we were thinking about what is that culture that we're talking about, and how is that manifesting in this community, both in the tangible and in the intangible. And to take that one step further, what is worthy of preservation? What is worthy of celebration? How is the community investing in that? And then the second question, I kind of want to actually turn on its head. I said, how does this impact our relationship to nature and the places we inhabit? But I think actually, and this is the case in Mesilla, you'll see how the land itself has shaped the people and the culture and those places that they built. And then ultimately it comes down to, in planning, in design, moving forward, who decides how those decisions are made around the culture that we celebrate, the culture that we preserve. How do we understand that in relationship to how those decisions have been made before, and how can we learn from that to rewrite how we're doing that into the future? And hopefully with the outcome being communities that are more reflective of the places that we need and the places we love, and the stories that we all hold in relationship to them. So wanted to just like jump back and show again that relationship where planning is kind of this front end of that decision-making process. It offers an opportunity for the community to provide that critical direction to ensure that that work is successful, and I'll maybe use that in quotes. I think successful being that these places are truly lived in, that they are not just centerpieces or things that are held as precious, but are in the dirty daily ritual of our lives. I say that diversity is our strength here because I think oftentimes, especially at this level of planning, and historically certainly this has been the case, we see that there's sort of sometimes singular voices that are coming through to make those decisions. That continues today. And so as much as we can, at least for us, we're trying to ensure that on that front end, we're pulling in as much of the community as we can to that process to make sure that all those voices are heard. And then inherent to that is like recognizing the power dynamics when you're in a room together and trying to set that space in a way that not just one voice dominates, so that others can bring forward their ideas, their stories, their pieces of culture that they want to celebrate. So on the design end, I think that this is something too where planning informs the design, where when we're setting standards, when we're trying to create good guidelines for how we want to do things well moving forward, we need to be flexible, we need to be adaptable, showing a range of options so that there is still the ability to be creative in that process. And always, that must be balanced with real community needs. So it's not designed for the sake of design, it's designed for the sake of the lived experience. And then finally, with development, I think this is a tricky one because we need to work really closely with our real estate development community to make sure that this is true, but we should invest in that so that our future development holds the values that the community has set forward at the beginning of that process during planning and during design. So for Mesilla, and just curious by a show of hands, who's all been down there to see it? Yeah, I was gonna say, I figured a lot of folks, if you are at all a fan of history. So it provides, I think, an interesting sort of cousin to Santa Fe. You have this amazing historic community. It's a true destination in southern New Mexico for cultural events and experiences. The place it comes alive during these moments. If you've ever been down there for Cinco de Mayo or some of these other events, it's really special. Like Santa Fe and like other communities that have this sort of tourism and economic development pressure from the outside, its property values are increasing and pricing out families. And especially in a place like Mesilla, where you still have a lot of inhabitants who are these long-time, multi-generational families, this is something that is very challenging. With that, there's also this desire to preserve the agricultural greenbelt. This might be a little more unique to Mesilla. Historic agricultural community that agricultural heritage really shines through in the buildings there, in the places there, but also in the food, in the celebrations, and everything that they do. And so there's this strong desire, but it really has to be tempered, and this is a real challenge for residents right now with the reality of climate change and the lack of water. And I think our recent Supreme Court decision underlines how that's going to only continue to be more of a challenge into the future. So being able to celebrate that, but also adapt accordingly with climate change is going to be necessary for Mesilla to continue. This was a slide that came together, it's really big up there, after our first community meeting where we just had asked residents to state, the top word that comes to mind when they think about Mesilla, and of course you see its history, its culture, agriculture, the food, the restaurants, all coming together as the most iconic elements of this place that they call home. And so for us as planners, we were trying to understand how we can celebrate that unique culture without creating unintended burdens or barriers to development within the community. So a few of the ways that we began to do that was to first honor historic building practices. And I appreciated this preservation is a verb and not a noun, because I think that that was something that was really apparent in this process, where you have local knowledge holders who it was almost more important to have that sharing opportunity with different generations and young people to learn these building practices rather than to have this beautiful product at the end of the day. Of course, that is our goal as well, but that's going to take time. And in that learning, in that sharing of knowledge, especially around traditional adobe architectural practices, there was a lot of power there. And you could sort of see that in real life in that exchange. The second was that we were thinking also about how our policy, and I know this is something that is also just, I think, on the minds of communities all over New Mexico right now and across the nation really, where our policy has such power to begin to either hold those values that we have of uplifting culture while also creating the flexibility to have development that is necessary for our communities to continue and survive. And be inclusive. So that was something that we dug into with housing, but then also thinking about how we could really work with business owners to create more flexibility along corridors within the community. There's great guidelines for the historic core of Mesilla, but for many businesses, this was just untenable for the long-term survival of their practices. So thinking about that more. And then finally, we wanted to provide direction for city or town leaders and for the community about how to make those critical investments when we have limited resources. And so thinking about not just investments in place, but investments especially in programs that would begin to share that learning around adaptive agriculture and building practices, local building practices. In addition to that, there was a lot of conversation about how the experiences themselves that were centered on community members, in addition to tourists, but especially community members, was something that was essential. So taking time to honor the stories of residents and longtime families of Mesilla, investing in those spaces that celebrated food and art, and local gatherings was equally important. And so one of the groups that we worked with is Carencia Mi Mesilla, and you can see Pat Taylor right there in the left photo. And so we were fortunate to begin to work with this group who worked with local students at NMSU, and there was collaborations, of course, with folks across New Mexico at UNM and beyond, to begin to share this knowledge around building adobes. And this is one of the properties that they were working at, which was right in the heart of Mesilla, really close to the community center. It's a really incredible property, and one that is slowly but surely coming back to life with their diligence and work. This is actually, I think this is an interesting zoning map because it shows in green, of course, that which has been historically agricultural, but as part of our process, we are working on shifting the allowable uses here, because at this point, it's very difficult for farmers to make a full living here. Most of the folks who are farming now are also working jobs in addition to that, because it just does not pencil out, and it's only going to get harder into the future. But the other thing that we focused on was looking at these key corridors of the Avenida de Mesilla, which cuts through the heart of town, kind of like north-south-ish, and then University, which connects out back to Las Cruces. I should mention that, of course, Las Cruces is, it's sort of shaded in this brownish on the northeastern corner of the map. There's a lot of pressure coming out from the city as it grows. People want to expand more into Mesilla. And so it's balancing those needs for real housing here and more allowable uses, with Mesilla still trying to adhere to its core values of still honoring its agricultural past and finding a way to support those who are still practicing that. And then just a couple of photos too of the historic plaza here in Mesilla. There's the recently designated Taylor Messia Historic Site in town that is well worth a visit if you ever get back to it. That's been an amazing project, which in the spirit of storytelling and preservation, the community has invested a lot of time into preserving and upholding this space, making it a space where people share their stories, their memories, their histories that are tied to the town. And so a couple of lessons learned around this. In terms of what supports a healthy community, it's diversity within the population. While we were having community meetings, there would be a lot of debates around how to open up for new development without it detracting from the historic character of the community. And one thing that everyone could agree on is that if there isn't a place for the children or the younger generation to come back to, that the town will die. And so, not to be dramatic, but that was something that people could really come back to and say, like, we want a space for our children, we want a space for our grandchildren. We need to find ways to adjust the way we think about housing in a way that makes it still possible for them to come back and to afford to live here. We can honor the past and tell its stories while making room for future visioning. I realized something that was important here was the pace at which we do that. I think it's really easy, especially if you've got like a given timeline for a project and you're trying to meet your deadlines, to rush through this piece, but especially in Messia, it was just something where we realized we needed to slow way down and give people time and breathing room to share their stories, their histories, and to honor that before we started to make any decisions around that moving forward. One other thing here was that young people are key, and I say this too because your traditional community meeting won't necessarily attract this audience. And so we were really fortunate to work with teachers at the local elementary school, and we were able to work on some projects with them to help understand their desires, their needs, their parents, and what they needed in the community. And then finally, you can't take that power of policy for granted. I think it's something that it takes time to take a step back and begin to translate that for communities sometimes, especially for folks who haven't been traditionally involved in this type of work. But it's well worth it. And as planners, our job is to begin to interpret that to the broader community, why it matters, where you can plug in, where you can have real impact in the change that happens. And in that way, thank you, I think it makes for better decision making overall. So thinking about for Santa Fe involvement, especially when it comes to something like the general plan, this can be a big, meaty document and a long process that can feel very inaccessible. But I think that this is something that when taking the right steps and breaking that down to the level that community can understand what their stake is in the game, it makes it worth it to do that and to take that time. So I'll leave it at that. Turn it back over. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Do you want to go right? Okay, great. Great, thank you both. I'm wondering if you could each recall a moment in your career when, during a project, you were exposed to community voices that fundamentally changed your viewpoint on a development issue connected to heritage, and how that might have influenced something subsequent to that.
You want me to go?
Go first.
Well, I don't have a lot of situations like that. I would say I've been on presenting projects, H-Board, Board of Adjustment. And the one thing that comes up a lot is walls and roofs. So people are very attached to walls in Santa Fe and to roofs. So one property owner wanted a wall between their project and the new project. And you saw the other one at Landon Foundation. It was a very short wall that became actually a design epiphany
brilliant.
and moment that we had to solve, and it became a building. So I guess that is some type of heritage that could come from that. And I think it was the Solace Center gained from having a wall between adjacent property and their property. It wasn't going to be there, and a wall emerged. It was like the cost of a car at the time that they had to spend. And at Landon Foundation, roofs on the second phase that we did were very important decisions that had to be made. So those are things that come to mind to me.
So for me, I'm going to take us to another place. I worked in Detroit for 10 years before moving out here in 2020. And there was a building close to my house in Old Redford that neighborhood built up in 1920s, 1930s. And there was a bank on the corner of one of the main commercial corridors. Gorgeous bones. And it long since vacant, though, like a lot of buildings around where we were at the time. And there was plywood in the windows. And on one of the primary faces of the building that fronted Grand River, which was the commercial corridor, there was this painting of Obama that somebody had completed at some point in time. And everybody called it the Obama building for years because of this. And so eventually the city began to target neighborhoods for redevelopment, and Old Redford was one of them. And there was a developer interested in that property. I mean, there was still a lot to be loved there, and they started the process for redesigning that. And there was this enormous outcry when they removed the plywood that included Obama. And so there was this pause, and the developer at the time sort of took a step back and started working with some of the community members there in the neighborhood association that we were a part of at the time. And they brought back, luckily they hadn't tossed it out, they brought it back, the mural, but then sort of expanded it and used it as inspiration on one of the facades of the building that faced the other road, Losser. And it was a moment for me to think about, again, like what piece of this history are we preserving? What is the piece that resonates with the community today? And in some ways, it's that, oftentimes it's not that like capital A architecture. It's the
Historic Obama mural.
Yeah, it's the historic Obama mural that was done sometime in the 2010s. So that was my moment.
That's great. Getting to the issues of the land development code and the general plan opportunities that we have here in Santa Fe, I think one of my fears is that the conversations around that are going to be limited, and I think I probably revealed my tendencies about community input. And I'm sorry to see that this isn't a full house. It's great that everyone is here. We have lost a few people after lunch. What do you have any thoughts, the two of you, about how we can enter this planning process and do better by the full diversity of the citizens here in Santa Fe? How can we involve them in these discussions?
So I think the first thing is transparency. I think oftentimes people don't see how the moment they've showed up is translated into real decision making. And I think the leaders on this project will need to show exactly how that's done. And I think that the challenge with that, of course, is going to be that there's not going to be consensus on one thing or the other. There's going to be a diversity of opinions there. But I think the key will be showing how you get from point A to point B. I think something that goes along with that too, again, I think is breaking things down as much as possible into their disparate parts. This is a cohesive plan for the community, but not everybody's going to care about everything. And frankly, it can be very overwhelming, and to be able to make a decision effectively with that much information is very hard. So as much as possible, if the planners and decision makers who are creating this process can begin to break down those elements of the plan into the pieces that people care about, I think that that will hopefully produce results that are more grounded in what the community really wants. And when I say community, I mean a diverse section of the community, not
Right.
just those who usually show up to these meetings.
I think it's a trick question. It's a trap. Do I have to answer? There are so many things in place, and a lot of guides for preservation in Santa Fe. I think we're in pretty good shape in terms of that, but I think I have different beliefs. I think I have concerns about losing the preservation, losing the historicism when you start making new buildings that look like historical buildings. So I don't know how we get out of this issue with, say, H-Board and with the codes. If there's another way to go that's outside of that, that's acceptable to all parties. You know, there are certain materials and colors that have been used historically, or construction methods, which should be focused on and listened to in terms of being acceptable, in terms of you know, things getting approved. But I think things need to change. But you know, I know it's very complicated, and there's people that have very strong beliefs in different directions. So I would just hope that we can move to just a different level that helps. It's really the distinction to me of historic buildings and new buildings, because we do live in this world in Santa Fe where you may not know what's historical and what's not, because it's meant to look like it's old. So.
Yeah. I think for me, what's exciting about the general plan in particular is that we get, as a populace, we're able to focus on what we want to preserve, how we're going to preserve it, but most importantly, why are we doing this? And one of the things that I'm really bothered by about preservation in Santa Fe is that it's entirely focused on a district model, and that we have basically drawn lines around 25% of the city, and some people think that's not enough. I think that's way too much. But because it's done as a district level and not on individual resource level, we've completely removed the citizen's voice from the process. Whereas most cities that have a vibrant, healthy preservation culture, it's the citizens themselves that are advocating, I want to preserve this building. There is only, as far as I know, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, as far as I know, there is only one building that is on the historic register in this city that is not in a district, and that's the airport, the terminal. And that just seems nuts to me, that we've handed over control. My favorite writer on heritage is an Australian academic named Laura Jane Smith, and she talks a lot about the authorized heritage discourse, and it's a degree of control, of hierarchy, that we have the powers that be have taken away. This is no longer democratic how preservation happens here. It just happens because we've drawn a line around certain portions of the city. I'm wondering, if you all have kind of thoughts on that, and particularly you, Danielle, as a planner, like how can we bring the public back into preservation?
Yeah, and I know we're running a little tight on time. So, oh, perfect.
Dan will
okay,
ta-
I
Dan
wasn't
will take
sure if you were.
questions.
Yellow light.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Well, okay, I have a lot of thoughts about that, but I think the first is we absolutely take our power for granted when we don't realize how we can exercise it. And I think when we let our policies speak for us, rather than being an active participant in that, like that's what happens. Like our communities are dictated by decisions that were made a long time ago and may or may not have relevance to how we live today and what we want today. So I think that it's something where once people can sort of pull back the curtain and see how the sausage is made, they do see how much agency they can have in the process.
Generally not a good idea.
I know, maybe not quite that visceral, but I do think that there is something to having to advocate for what you want to see in your community. And if we take away some of the sort of blanket guidelines and decision making that we have right now in our current policies and code and begin to shift that back into something where it's those decisions need to be initiated more at the grassroots level and uplifted when it's important to the people, whether that's around a building or space or a policy itself. I think that people feel that empowerment and people recognize that, and it sort of stimulates and perpetuates that involvement as much as one can in our local democracy.
Well, we have a intern in our office. He's 19 years old. He's going to be a junior going into UNM School of Architecture and Planning. He's our summer intern. And we were up at a construction site up in Abiquiu yesterday, or the day before, and he was asked what kind of buildings he likes. Do you like the newer ones or the older ones? And he said he likes the older ones. So I take that the new generation is like looking for authenticity. They're looking to understand, what's real and what's things that have been here for a long time. There's a richness to it. So, there's a lot
Even our fake buildings are historic here.
You're right. Yes. So, I don't know. There's a stake in the citizenry that should be looking at the authenticity and, what is it? What it is about this historicism that's important. So.
Let's open it to questions. I see Elizabeth's got her hand up.
I guess that is an invitation to speak. My name's Elizabeth West, and I like thrown a question into my mind, all of you together, collectively, which is part of the deal. And that is, how do we get other people who aren't normally in a crowd like this involved? Young people, your own families, people who think they don't know what architecture is. And we don't have to teach them how to spell it. We just have to enjoy doing it with them. And apropos of what Mr. Horn said about the young man who's working with you, it reminded me of my grandchildren. I have one who's 22, and the others are 14. And they all have said, we kind of think that old stuff is cool. But some of our friends don't want to inherit their family's dishes. But it goes beyond that. So I asked them, I said, why is it cool? Well, you feel like you're part of a community if you can have a family, or if the people in your neighborhood are people you know. And then you get interested in their houses. And there's not my oldest grandchild said, there's not a whole lot of difference between a pretty nifty house and the nice people that you want to see living in it. Now that's a pretty rough generalization, but I think what you're all in a way talking about in your very different approach is the importance of education. And I'll just end with something I experienced when I was in Spain walking on the Camino. I came around the bend at one point, and I'm not athletic, I'm slow. I get there, but I'm slow. and there was a gigantic black, I guess it was Angus bull. And I thought, my ex-husband is rancher. I know better. But I was terrified. And then I looked again. And I found out later that across Spain, outside of the great cities, is kind of a general nationwide rule that we're not going to have a lot of horrible advertising on the highways. Now, I wish we were doing that in this country. But there was an uproar about one particular advertisement for Jerez Sherry. And their model, which had a lot of wording around it and so on, was a black bull. And the country said, we want to keep the black bull. We can get rid of the rest of it. And of course, it's benefited that company. But it was wonderful. So from that shock, I realized we can change our ideas. I'm in favor of historic preservation. Most of you know that about me.
Yeah,
But I would like to include solar. And I want to know, how does education for young people connect to solar?
Thank you. Thanks. So the education for the youth.
Yeah, I have that conversation with my children all the time. I'm a new empty nester, not particularly a fan of it. And I talked to we talked to we have two boys, and they're not going to come back to Santa Fe. And they love old buildings. We lived in a house in Philadelphia that was built in 1740 and then 1860 and now here in 1960. They love old things, but they want a balance. They say, Dad, I can't see my future in Santa Fe because I literally don't see the future in Santa Fe. I don't even see the present in Santa Fe. So I want to make sure that this is not an either-or discussion. We can love old buildings, and we can love new buildings. New buildings make old buildings better, and vice versa. So.
I would add just one thing to that, because I'm thinking of the memories that we associate with place. Young people are not immune to this. Young people have very strong ties and attachments to the places where they can connect the smell, what they heard there, their experiences there. And so as much as we can make our public spaces inclusive of young people, draw them in, allow them to create those memories and attachments, that's what will create, I think, a new generation of advocates for our beloved spaces.
Over my years, I've taught a lot of architecture clubs. I know Shawn was a part of it at Gonzales Community School. But that is, and at Rio Grande School, I've done it there. And that's just an incredible, incredible experience. And we work from 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension. And the excitement just keeps building every time we meet, designing things. So I think getting kids younger and looking at design and spaces is very powerful. And then I'll mention too, as a side note, I play bluegrass music, and as some people know here, and there was a guitar seminar. And these guys were going around and bragging about their Martin guitars, and one guy's like, "I've got a pre-war Martin, and it's really cool." And then the next guy is like, "Yeah, mine's from the late '50s. It's really worn in and great." And then the last guy is like, "Mine's from 2013, and I have the newest one here." And but it's just this irony of the old instruments. The wood that was back then and just the quality makes incredible sounds, and is just so rich and great to. So.
Hi, thank you guys.
I can't see anything, but
I'm a native of Santa Fe, born and raised here, current resident, but I've had the fortunate pleasure of traveling around the globe, and 2 cities that have struck with me in terms of their decision making. I'd like to share just for a moment. One of them is Frankfurt. As you mentioned about the war and the bombing of the war of many cities there, Frankfurt made a decision to rebuild or build anew their old town. They wanted to do that so that their children and their legacy would have something to remember what their city used to look like. So on one half of the river, you have the older town, and on the other half of the river, you have the modern glass skyscrapers. So I thought that was telling of the leadership that Frankfurt had to make of those decisions early before the rebuilding started. Across the globe, another city, Singapore. Singapore is on an island. They have no natural resources. Everything there is tall glass, feng shui kind of design. They have no old town. When I went and asked, show me the old town, they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. They said, Kathy, nothing here is older than 10 years old. They take things down and they rebuild them. No car is older than 10 years. But they did say, if you want to see what Singapore used to look like, go down to that street by the Raffles Hotel and you'll see what the opium dens used to be. And they replicated the opium dens. Singapore has made a decision not to let anything get old, but they've also embraced the climate change needs, and now their rules are, if you're going to build anything in Singapore, any green space that you take down, you have to replicate it. The challenge is, on an island, they don't have a place to do it, so they're putting it on the outside of the buildings. And I would encourage you all to take a look at that, and I guess my point is not so much a question, but I ring the bell again of the cities need to decide who they're going to be and what they want to show and what they want to preserve.
So I think, Miles, is that you? Miles, I have a
Yes.
question, and there's one up here and one down here, and then I think that's all we're going to have
Okay,
for right now.
I'll be quick. I think we do, Danielle, this is interested in your perspective on this. I think that we do folks a disservice by labeling them as NIMBYs sometimes, because we're not allowing for that storytelling, the community interest that you brought up in your slides. Like, what does the community really want here? And then on the other side of the equation, there comes a time when a community member, maybe a small collection of community members, will weaponize heritage as a verb in order to prevent something that is for the greater good. And so I think, how do you find balance in that moment? When you have when everyone in the room is feeling it, you're like, they don't really care about this, they just don't want that, which is the progress, which is maybe for the greater good. I think we run up against it all the time. I'm curious how you handle it.
I think that is one of the biggest challenges in our community public meeting spaces today. I think that everybody has their motivation for being in that room, and as much as we can get to the bottom of, you meet somebody who is resistant to this idea, this project, this whatever, trying to get to the bottom of that motivation and reveal that in real time in a way that is safe, that allows for them to be vulnerable in that way, is the way to begin to get to a space of common ground. I will not say that it's easy. Again, I think that it takes a lot of work to help people to feel safe enough to begin to share their motivations and their values. But I think that's something that we have to do in order to find, we don't agree on these things, but we do agree on this. And if we use that as our guiding light for how to move something forward, maybe not in the way we originally imagined, then that's how we can still continue to get work done. It's not easy, though. I will say that. I think sometimes it takes back work, it takes separate conversations, but ultimately, I think there's value in others hearing that voice and not demonizing it. Because I think as soon as somebody feels that resistance, they close right off, and you're never going to get to that space of understanding.
I think it's especially challenging here in Santa Fe, where development has benefited to a large extent one group of people and not the people that founded this city. And so the Hispano community here is often, in the development world, you hear them being, oh, they're against change, when they're trying to hang on to just the very last shred of them feeling like this is their city, and yet this is the most complicated, diverse, beautiful, frustrating place I've ever lived or practiced in, and we've got to figure out how we can embrace multiple viewpoints, and that preservation can mean very different things to very different parts of our community, and that we don't. I think Santa Fe would be such a richer, more beautiful place if you could walk through it and live that and see radically different approaches to heritage, intangible, tangible, all on the same street. What could be more profound?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Liana Aguirre, and I'm the historic preservationist for the town of Mesilla. I just wanted to follow up, and hi, Danny.
Uh-oh.
Thank you for all your work. There's a lot of things I wanted to touch upon, and the challenges Mesilla, I guess, has been facing, and something I'm coming up across is we've never had a historic preservation officer or a preservationist. This is the first, I am the first. Which is quite the challenge. It's also a blessing in a way. It gives me full range to kind of explore. But one thing that's continuously being mentioned is education, and also giving voice to the mesilleros that have been there for generations. And there's 7th generation residents there, and that is my goal right now, to bring them and give them their voice. I just had a little preservation week. It was 4 days of wonderful events, just really trying to get people to come out of the woodworks. The people who come to the meetings are newcomers. They've been living in Mesilla for less than 10 years, maybe less than 5 years. And these are the only people coming to our public meetings, which is very, very interesting. The other aspect is I am looking to secure our agricultural lands. And as Danny mentioned, there's a water, Danielle, Miss Danielle Wilson, as she mentioned, there's a lot of separation with the true mesilleros and the newcomers, and to bring out the voice of the agricultural communities out there is very difficult to kind of, you really have to go door to door. And I know that's something that was come across. So it's really a challenge to seek these people out. And so what my goal right now is just really pushing forward, kind of, in a very kind and nice way, is shoving preservation in their face, but saying, it is 100% about the people. There's so many little, I say Mesilla is like a little pueblo where there's a lot of headbutting. My family did this, which is beautiful in one sense, but in the other sense is saying, how can we bring everybody together? Actually, that was my closing remark yesterday. They said, well, we want to be able to kind of get everybody together, but we have so many, you're not happy with this family. And I said, we have to really brush that off, because that's not going to happen. Nothing will happen if we can't just come together and get this happening. And I've also been incorporating some summer programming for the children. Last summer, I held 2 preservation courses, and the children, the way their response was amazing. I had a scavenger hunt with them around the town, just pointing out some acequias, pointing out some adobe work, pointing out, our plaza, our historic sites, and they lit up. I was so taken. It was amazing. And this summer I'll be having a mini Adobe build with them, and just kind of getting these hands-on interactive opportunities that I think little by little kind of highlighting what preservation is and putting community first. There's a lot of work to be done. I'm trying to lay out some groundwork, but I tell my community I can't do it without them. So just an update of where Mesilla is at with that. So thank you.
Congratulations, that sounds wonderful. My favorite memories, my favorite experiences in heritage and in preservation are with children, 100%. And, you know, what kid doesn't like to play in the mud? And just mud plastering pueblos with families and friends has been one of the greatest gifts of my life. So we're in a really amazing place to bring children into the work that we do. So I would encourage everyone to make that happen on every project.
So we'll do one more, and then I'll cut my closing remarks a little shorter near the end too. So we'll sacrifice a little bit.
Thank you, Melanie. My name's Anthony Guida, and I'm nice, I promise. I'm really excited to be at a panel where we're talking about the future of preservation in Santa Fe, talking about inclusion, talking about the South Side, Midtown, all being part of the preservation part of Santa Fe. Santa Fe has started at the kind of scrape end of Shawn's spectrum earlier, where style really was preservation, whether it was these restorations, the invention of the Santa Fe style, as a way to be compatible with this place. And for years we have conflated, much to the detriment of our historic districts, style and preservation. Do the things that we're talking about here today, the neighborhoods, the stability, the inclusion, the affordability, do they point to the possibility of decoupling style from preservation in Santa Fe?
God, I hope so.
And how would that work?
Well, that was one of the things I was talking about is materiality, construction methods as something to look at. And it may not be the end all, but it could be a pathway to figuring out a more broad interpretation.
I mean, what's essential about living in a place, in community, is not what the buildings look like. It's the pattern of how houses greet the street. It's the pattern of how homes ring a park. It's the pattern of how people who spill out of their church doors or their mosque doors or their temple doors and inhabit the public sphere. That's what makes a community. That can be done in any material. And I think if we need to start with questions of what makes living in Santa Fe special. What it looks like can be for the tourists, but for us who are fortunate, who are blessed to live here, we need to focus on like how do we live together? How do the spaces that in which we dwell, how does that cement our relationships? And if we do that first, I'm convinced the aesthetics will be right.
Thank you all. That was a really great panel. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back. And our next speaker is Heather Lamboy, whose name has been invoked a few times today. So she's going to do a presentation a little bit about Santa Fe Forward, I think some of the program. And then we're going to open it up to questions amongst the audience. For those of you who were here last year, Anthony Guida was kind enough, see, there we go, Shawn, nice or kind, enough to be our speaker last year and then moderated the forum. So it'll be much more of an open forum, and I'm sure we might have responses from some of the people too who were previous panelists. If they've stuck around, they might have some more comments to make too. But I just want to go ahead and get started, and we'll help me all welcome Heather Lamboy.
I'm much shorter. So it's the 9th inning, and I guess I'm the closer. I hope you guys stay awake, so please do. So I really do appreciate all the things that I have learned today. This has been a rich discussion, and I've been taking mental notes with everything that has been said. It's really critical that I listen and hear these comments as well as our team, just because the community voice is what is most important. I'm a member of the community. I live in Santa Fe, but there's a lot of other people who have so much to offer to all of us in determining what our future is going to look like. So there are two things I'm going to update. The first one is the Santa Fe Forward project. It was on pause for a little while. We were waiting for some funding, and certainly one of our technical working group members was like, what happened? Well, finally we're getting back at it. So that's also really good because we're accelerating the schedule, and so that it can inform our land development code update process. So I think it's a really critical and unique thing that we're able to do when it comes to having both projects going at the same time, although it drives me nuts sometimes. It's a lot of work, but I think it is meaningful work. So if everything is a priority, then nothing is. So we really do have to make some decisions, and there have been a lot of comments about what decisions we should make. So per state law, we have to do a general plan. The plan is intended to be a plan of action where it guides capital and operating budgets and what kind of projects that we do, what kind of projects hopefully to guide the decisions for investments throughout the community. It is going to be concise and prioritized. So the general plan document from 1999, and yes, I'm old enough, I was working on that project when I first worked for the city of Santa Fe. Freshly minted historic preservation planner. I went to the University of Texas at Austin. And it has approximately 400 pages. There are 492 goals. Many of them we achieved, but some of them didn't have any metrics. So we can say, oh, that was a nice idea. This nice idea is still in place. But how do we implement that? And that's why we're going to be creating an implementation plan so that it is actionable. Throughout my career, I've been involved with many different comprehensive plan projects, which is normally how it's related to, or referred to. But there's a lot to be done in making sure we remember the message and then figure out what we're going to do about it. So there's dual components, the general plan, as well as the part of this project has been the City Smart mapping website that we're creating. I heard the word transparency earlier, and I take that to heart. And so our City Smart website is trying to cut down on the number of public records requests we get. So what building permits have I had on this property? With this website, you will be able to go, it's geographic information systems based, click on that property and see whatever information that we have. So somebody at 10 o'clock at night can be looking that up instead of having to come into the office or submit a public records request. The information should be there. It's I think, our obligation as a local government to be transparent. Wonderful. Thank you. So we kicked off the project in September 2024. We always want this done yesterday. It's taking time, but I think it's well invested time. So we mobilized the Community Partners Program. We had 30 different agencies or 30 different nonprofits apply to be partners. It's a micro-grant program. Historic Santa Fe Foundation applied, but what we prioritized in terms of the funding were those organizations that could really reach out to parts of the community that we don't normally reach out to. So that included Miguel Acosta's group, the Earth Care Project group, and he was able to engage with his constituency in a safe place, in a safe space. So instead of having us there as, bureaucrats, the Earth Care group, they were able to talk freely amongst themselves with some guiding, questions that we provided to them, and they were able to give us feedback, which I think is critically important. And then we also had the technical working group. So we've accomplished stage gate 1. We figured out, okay, who are we right now? This is our snapshot. What is Santa Fe? And so part of that was the assessment report. We identified that the greatest area of displacement in this community is the Agua Fria area. And so that helped to inform a decision already when it comes to the mayor pulling back on doing the Phase 1B annexation, because that area is an area of displacement. If you create city-level densities and intensities, then more people will be displaced as their land becomes more valuable. So it's really critical to think about the lessons learned and who we are to be able to apply that to policy. And so we are now in stage gates 2 and 3. With those community conversations that our community partners had, they answered some questions, and they've brought us to a certain place of understanding of what those community priorities are. We also had a lot of engagement last summer. I was at Pride, and many members of my team were at the movies in the park in the South Side. We're going to be out there again this summer getting comments from people as they go about their daily lives. I think that's really an important thing, is to be there. And you know, it's quite honestly one of my favorite aspects of being a planner, is really getting to know people like you, as well as throughout the community, and learn from people. So the stage gate 4 is going to be the preferred plan map. This is also referred to as oftentimes the future land use map. And that helps to guide at that 30,000 foot level how our development is going to be implemented through the land development code. So it truly informs what the zoning map is going to look like. And then we also will go through an adoption of the implementation plan. We're hoping to get the general plan up before the city council. I was about to say governing body, but there's lots of governing bodies, so I always have to say city council, just from my own experience. And that would be in the fall, and the implementation plan by the end of the year. So we are really trying to be aggressive in our schedule so that we can get down to the brass tacks of what we do on the ground through the land development code. So to date, we've had, and this is a couple months old, I have to admit, have had over 9,500 unique website visitors to the SantaFeForward.org website. We had 788 long surveys that were completed. Our community is very engaged, and for that, I'm very proud to be part of a community that really cares about what happens in the future. I've worked in Tampa, Florida, as well as Aurora, Colorado. There was not this level of engagement in those bigger places that there is here in Santa Fe, and I think that's something that's very special. There were approximately more than 45 hours at 15 events, getting more than 450 pieces of information. We asked specific questions, and we got answers, we wrote them down, and we included that in the overall big picture of what the community wants. And then we also received over 8,000 pieces of community input, very specific comments about what we want to see. So the greatest alignment amongst the general public, the technical working group, and our community partners, not a surprise, housing and affordability. One of the things that disgusts me the most is that we don't have access to that $1.5 million that, from the excise tax. The community is still messaging that, we support affordable housing, we support what we voted for, and that hasn't changed. Almost 40% of the people that work in Santa Fe can't live here. They go to Rio Rancho, they go to Pecos, they go to other parts of our region. And it's a really hard thing to swallow when you think a lot of those people who have to go elsewhere are young people. They're our vitality, they're our future. And so that's really an important piece to allow for the young family to enter and have some form of wealth building through owning a house or even having access to an apartment. Community facilities and services, those are critical things. We have a lot of parks that are not kept very well because we have more than the city of Albuquerque. So what do? How can we re-envision some of the parks so that there may be different types of uses and something that is still very much community serving, but not as much of maintenance issue. We keep getting more and more parks workers, but it's a lot to keep up with the weeds. Environmental stewardship and resilience. Our climate is changing. We have some very locally adaptive climate responses through use of adobe construction, for instance. It's very efficient, but we need to think about the future. We need to think about those investments in water conservation efforts and all sorts of different types of other programs so that we can be resilient, including a wildland-urban interface regulation, which we're starting to work on. And mobility and transportation. People want to walk from their house. Honestly, we've heard that comment a lot. I would like to walk to the grocery store or be able to ride a bike in a very close proximity. And also, you know, Santa Fe Trails, there's been several comments about how it functions, you know, fairly well, but, you know, there's that last mile that's really challenging. And so we've communicated with Santa Fe Trails, and we're working on that sort of last mile on-demand piece that has been identified as something that would be really helpful to the community. So one of the findings that were notable to us, they include that population growth is forecast to continue, but we're not having as many children. You know, we're actually getting older in our community, so it's going to level off. So in the United States generally, we're seeing this trend. We're seeing the outmigration from rural areas and fringe communities into more urban areas, and I've heard many comments about how kids move away. There's no future here. And I've been fortunate enough that my daughter came back, and she works at Los Alamos, and she lives in our community. That's very special, but I think that's a unique circumstance. So I'm very lucky in that regard. There's substantial vacant and underutilized land within the current city limits. Fabiola Chavez and I are working on assembling all of the city land and trying to make it one of those immediate returns on affordable housing. So there's a city lot, and put one unit there, or maybe two, but it is progress. It doesn't, you know, we're not going to find solutions overnight, but we can make those incremental changes that do have impact. And I mentioned that displacement risk and that we found out about in terms of the Agua Fria area. Water supply is adequate, but we really need to make investments to make sure that we keep that top of mind. Water rights do, for all of our development applications over a certain size, water rights do need to be provided, but it's getting more and more challenging because of the local, you know, region and the competition for water resources. And then housing, employment, and mobility opportunities all need to diversify. So at Midtown, Aspect Studios is partnering with our group to create an innovation hub. So Herbs Etc. has a grow house there, and they're really trying to work with some research on use of herbs and tonics and the like. We also have some Los Alamos think tank that is moving into Benildes Hall. There's a lot of opportunity to think about our region and find ways that we can have those primary jobs that will retain people and provide employment opportunities for the future. This is a mission statement that was pulled together from all of that input. Faithful to our heritage, focused on our present and forging our future, Santa Fe Forward shapes the city different, and that's something we're very proud of, is that we're different, and sets priorities and opens opportunities for all. This is something we'll shop with the community at large this summer, and you'll see us out in different events, getting some feedback from that. Vision statement. So there's the mission, that high level, this is what we want to do, this is the vision. Santa Fe supports and respects the needs and growth of all in harmony with our heritage and environment, thriving today and tomorrow as a city different. So threaded through all of that is the fact that we need affordable housing, transportation, mobility, all those four top things that are threaded into the vision statement. We started to draft some maps. I'm a map nerd, so I sort of really do like maps. I think they tell stories. And one of the stories in terms of getting people from one place to another, connecting people through many different modes of transportation and many different opportunities, is by having those community connectors as well as mobility spines. Eric Ani and the MPO has done a really great job of extending our trail networks and really making them robust and provide that option for people to navigate our city. such as the River Trail, the Arroyo de los Chamisos Trail. Having those connections across the town is really important, as well as improving our transit, not just adding more buses, but what do we really need? How are we going to implement this so it's meaningful to the community? And then also unified approach to accommodate and deliver coordinated and transformative transportation. So it's not centered around the car. That's when we worked on the Midtown Master Plan with Danielle Hernandez. The focus was really, how do you get bikes and people through here first, and then cars? And really make it sort of tight and constrained so that cars are forced to slow down, because this community is for the people, it's not for the cars. And we still are, in many ways, a very car-oriented community. So in those connectors, that through line is, how do we create centers of activity? And we already have an organic center of activity, and that's our downtown. The plaza, all the music, the rail yard, all the different things that happen in the Civic Center is one that was organically created over time. And how do we actually translate that to more organic centers of activity? And Sila Rufina is definitely up and coming. This is one of the areas we're recommending for an opportunity zone. Remember, Juan Torres was talking about 3 opportunity zones. We, on purpose, stayed away on an opportunity zone in the Hopewell Man neighborhood. The reason being is that, well, first of all, there's a lot of smaller neighborhood lots that are harder to redevelop, but also that's a displacement factor. If you have that infusion of capital that goes into a neighborhood, it's more quickly going to cause gentrification. And so the piece of that is truly, truly concentrating that at Midtown instead of Hopewell Man, providing employment opportunities for the people that live in Hopewell Man, but also providing for neighborhood preservation and keeping people in the place from which they, come from. And Tierra Contenta also with Phase 3B, or I'm sorry, that's too many things. Phase 3A of Tierra Contenta will be actually adding 1,500 units, both affordable as well as market rate. And it's going to create even more of a center of activity through the Southside Teen Center, the library, all the different types of things that are going along Airport Boulevard, and really implementing the good work that I think Miguel Acosta is doing with his team. So we have, in the hinterlands, we're working with Santa Fe County. They're in the process of updating their comprehensive plan. They're a little bit in the beginning stages of that. But Herbert Foster and Alex Ladd have been really working with us in the development of the plan, and they commented on this plan map. So we called it Barajes, the area, the hinterlands, sort of when you think about Cienega and how it used to be a stop on the Camino Real. They're stops, but truly maybe we need to retool that. They're communities that are part of the larger, community. These folks work in town. I know a lot of HomeWise folks that live in Rancho Viejo that actually work in town. These are the areas where people can afford to live more than in Santa Fe. So we have to consider that area as the area of influence for considering our general plan. Escarpments and areas, natural areas that we want to preserve and care for are included, as well as the outlining of the different centers of activities throughout town. So this is the resilience framework. How do we relate to those folks in the county that are really a part of our community, and how do we most efficiently distribute our growth and provide opportunity for redevelopment? So changing gears, the Land Development Code update. There was a visioning session with both the Planning Commission and the Historic Districts Review Board. Joe was part of the H-Board visioning session, so I'm sure that he has some ideas. I focused, because this is a preservation conference, on the Historic Districts Review Board questions that we asked. We didn't come into any conclusions yet, and there were a lot of different opinions, and that's part of I think that's a strength that we have. We need to realize that the difference of opinions our strength, not necessarily a weakness. Coming together is what's important. So the purpose of the code update was to provide future direction on historic preservation, but also identify major policy and structural and procedural issues that we need to provide for the community at large. We need to clarify the role of the HDRB. I think it was interesting, I was at a planning commission meeting and mentioned that the HDRB is actually a subcommittee of the planning commission. And Chair Clow was like, wow, they don't act like it. So there's one of those opinions that are out there. So it's always fun to see the different, ideas that come about. And then to begin discussing how preservation goals should relate to housing, that affordable housing goal that we have for the city, design, sustainability, and change over time, because we will change. We're not going to remain the same. And identify potential early action items. So setting the stage, what's going to inform our path forward is the governing body has developed a strategic plan and strategic goals. So this is our North Star. The North Star is that and pretty much most of these goals relate a lot to the goals that were identified with Santa Fe Forward. Housing and affordability. How do we have housing across the continuum for those entry-level housing opportunities as well as retirement opportunities as people downsize, which I will do someday after my kids get done with college. But I love having them in. My son's here, so I love having them as part of the house already, or still. So affordable and attainable housing, providing for the continuum, once again, of having opportunities for people to purchase and gain that wealth over time. The missing middle housing and infill adaptive reuse. How do we reuse our land? What drives me crazy is I drive by the old Chaparral Middle School and its storage for the Santa Fe Public Schools. Isn't that a great housing opportunity? Isn't it a great redevelopment opportunity? How do we get Santa Fe Public Schools to the table to really work and make those strategic investments that we need to make? It's in a perfect location. I actually live in the neighborhood relatively close. And, Albertsons is right there. There's all sorts of things, activities that we can do. Process modernization. We in land use are doing that right now. E-review has been the topic and the bane of my existence almost for past couple of years, actually since I began, and I think we're getting there. We're getting there with a platform so that in the fall, we'll be ready and we'll be accepting plans electronically. I hate that there's 3 people that are just shuffling plans and that's their job. It's time for them to retool, and we've just given promotions to a couple of them as they're starting to move into that review, trying to train our staff on hand and provide ladders so that they can grow and advance within our organization, stay with our organization, provide that institutional memory. There also needs to be reduced procedural barriers and predictability and clarity. The land development code needs to be about predictability. Yes, I'm looking at you, Anthony. So we have a lot of fun. So infrastructure and public safety, those are critical pieces. Airport Road finally is getting addressed, which has been, one of the comments I hear is, why are we left behind from the rest of the community? Why are we dealing with these potholes on Airport Road that eat our cars? And it's not pedestrian, it's not safe for pedestrians. And more people walk in that area than in many other parts of town. We need to have age-friendly development. The recent state law relative to childcare and state paying for childcare so that people can work and earn an income and also provide business opportunities. We need to have that infrastructure so that there's the ability for people to take care of children in their homes and give them the opportunity to be part of a neighborhood and a community instead of just somewhere off in an urban area, which is also helpful, but being part of that fabric, being able to stay in their neighborhood and have childcare available to them, I think is a really critical community piece that could be helpful. The coordination on infrastructure, as well as sustainability and resilience, making that infrastructure sustainable, long-lasting, and being responsive to climate. One of the first things we're going to be doing with Phase 2 of the Land Development Code update is the wildland-urban interface. We're working on that right now because it's not, in my opinion, a matter of if, but when we are threatened with forest fire. So it's just the way the West has been going. So how do we solve for that, or at least provide better assurance that we can manage that situation? I'm watching my time, sorry. I can talk, so there's a lot here. So I know there's a lot here. So generally, with the Phase 1 of our accomplishments, we reorganized and reformatted the code to make it more usable, understandable, and consistent. We improved administrative and review procedures. We're going to try to push it a little more to make sure that we have more administrative approvals in Phase 2. That might be controversial. Initial cleanup and modernization of code language and identifying unresolved policy issues for future phases. So in historic preservation, specifically for that ordinance, what we did was reorganize preservation procedures to improve coordination and usability, clarified HDR procedures and cross-references, maintained existing style definitions, and preservation standards during Phase 1, but it was the beginning of a conversation, a beginning of what we need to think about going forward. And we created a framework for future preservation discussions. When we did some of the initial engagement on the Land Development Code, we heard a lot about preservation. And a lot of the recommendations and input that we got from that Phase 1 assessment will be included in our Phase 2 assessment report. So that's, once again, going to be sort of the guide on where we need to start and how we're going to get there. So at the workshop with the Historic Districts Review Board, we asked some questions. We had questions for discussion, and I identified potential Phase 2 topics that we could do. And these are questions that we've heard. We collaborated with our consultant and our historic preservation team. These are the questions that we've heard in the community. How should the city balance preservation, compatibility, and architectural evolution? Should we have different historic districts? I mean, I heard a comment about that earlier. Should all those districts, I mean, the West Side Guadalupe is very different from the East Side. Do we need to really acknowledge that and honor that better? Should the code focus primarily on historic preservation or maintaining a broader Santa Fe character and identity? Like Joe Simmons mentioned, you know, we're part of one community, we shouldn't look like two. And how should contemporary architecture fit within historic contexts? Should we be more materials-based? What aspects of the current standards work well? And what doesn't work? So style definitions and terminology, those are going to be, you know, questions that we deal with. I think when it comes to the downtown and east side historic district standards, you only have recent Santa Fe style and you have old Santa Fe style. So when George O'Keeffe came for review and approval, it wasn't either one of those, according to the definition. Was that a good thing? I don't think so. If we really focus on the materials and the character of the city and how things can fit in that don't absolutely have to look like old Santa Fe, then we should allow for that compatible development. We should allow for contemporary architecture. Sometimes I bristle, and I'll just be honest, when, you know, somebody complains about not having steel vigas, you know, or having steel vigas projecting. It's sometimes really clean and really cool looking. But, you know, that's another question that our community needs to grapple with. What about sustainability? So the window questions that was brought up, you know, I was really sorry in the White Building that those windows are going away because, you know, as Shawn Evans mentioned, that's a good way to be sustainable is to preserve those windows. The other side of that is with the wildland-urban interface. Windows are the entrances for embers to be able to fly in and to, you know, that can ignite houses. So how do we solve for that? There could be many solutions. You could still retain historic windows, but how do you do it in a way that is fire resistant? And then sustainability, and how do we really keep that unique character? I mean, Santa Fe, the way it looks like it right now, is a major economic driver. That's why people come here. but it also is a community. So how do we balance for our community, our community's evolution, and also preserve the most important aspects of that community? And then relationship to Secretary of Interior standards. There's been conversations recently amongst the HDRB on clarifying how window preservation should take place. Should we use those Section 106 standards more consistently so it's more predictable? Another discussion topic had to do with the role of the HDRB. Sorry, I still get nervous and my mouth gets dry. So what is the board's role relative to the Planning Commission, the Archaeological Review Committee, and the governing body? Which decisions should remain board level versus administrative? And, you know, I read a paper, an article in the paper about how there needs to be more education amongst the staff, and take that to heart. I really do. What procedures are unclear, duplicative, or inconsistent? How can the process become more predictable and understandable? So that clarification of authority is going to be one of the first topics that we address. So we're also going to address administrative approvals, like, you know, the community at large. I think there's opportunity for administrative approvals with the proper staff and making sure that they're trained, you know, future staff are trained as well. One of the things, I have 4 appeals from the Historic Districts Review Board that are going to the City Council. That's something that slows down a project. Really, one of them is a really good mixed-use project on St. Francis, and it was turned down by the board because it was considered too tall. And, you know, I can understand the board's concerns, but then there's that, once again, balancing act. What are we going to do when it comes to providing for opportunities for dentists to live above their office and really be able to have something that's unique? They're still part of the community there instead of having to live elsewhere, and have their dental practice downstairs. And then also, you know, modernizing and streamlining our processes and clarifying those standards. So are those standards working? That's a question that we need to ask. I think there's a lot of opinions. Do we need to separate the downtown from the east side and have 2 different districts? Because we had the adoption of the Business Capital District standards that dealt with townscapes and form and shape. That was because I think that the historic preservation ordinances and styles ordinance did not comport with our downtown. And we had a downtown visioning plan, and we have a downtown vision plan that was never truly implemented because of those conflicts. So we need to even reach out and think, what do we need to change? What do we need to see differently? And so this district boundaries are going to be looked at. What is the historic review district, and how do we approach the historic review district? There's a lot of large lot development out there. Is it something that there are some really great buildings from the 1950s, but is it something that we really need to focus on from a historic preservation perspective? And then the neighborhood-based standards as well, and the contextual compatibility. So what are the change? How are we going to accommodate adaptive reuse? How are we going to have housing within historic contexts? So one of the projects that I worked on before I left as a senior planner, and my second tour of duty, was the redevelopment of the Manderfield School. And there was supposed to be a coffee shop there, and then all the classrooms were going to become studios for artist studios or just living spaces, and then houses that went around. This was 2013, and houses that infilled the back area. And there was a lot of opposition to that. We don't want commercial here. Well, I mean, when you think of Johnny's Cash Store, it's right in the middle of a neighborhood, and it was very much beloved. That's part of our cultural heritage, that we should allow for these things. And I was really happy to see that eventually it got approved. But there was a lot of opportunity all throughout our community, not just in the historic districts, for that adaptive reuse. And also the energy efficiency and sustainability, that's a really critical piece to remember and to weave into all the things that we do. And then we've already been able to accomplish a lot with reducing the required parking Parking takes space, it's an investment. You can go from $5,000 to $40,000 to provide a parking space. I would love to see the downtown Water Street parking lot be used for creating housing. Not as many people will need cars, but so that's like one of my dreams, is to see that lot become something, instead of just a parking lot. It's really sad. So that concludes my presentation. I know I threw a lot at you, but I look forward to your input.
We have about 30 minutes. Hello? Yes, okay, good. You just got to get close. Do we have any questions? I'm going to hold on, I'm going to go with Billy first, and then I'll come back.
Thank you, and great presentation and great sessions today. Thank you all very much. I wanted to try to put together what you just presented about the plan and that kind of work with some of the things we heard earlier in the morning session that had to do with an emphasis on, if you will, community building and neighborhood building and the social aspects of all this development stuff that we're talking about. What I didn't see in the slide presentation had to do with, if you will, the connecting of the process that the city uses for planning. This large process you're doing, and then there's the implementation, and how that might fit with the dynamics of the neighborhoods and their organizing. Because what happens at a community level is oftentimes at a very different speed and cycle than it is for the city. And I'll just give you an example. In terms of process modernization, there was nothing in that particular section that spoke to the idea of neighborhood engagement on a continuous basis. And that could be as simple as every 2 years asking for feedback like you do now as part of this big project, but not asking for feedback about how is this all working out for you. For that matter, the idea of not just asking people what they think now, but engaging neighbors and communities in terms of their own organizations, but then being able to participate in communities, in committees or boards that has more authority over decisions that are then made in terms of implementation. It seems to me that there's a potential for real rich engagement there that closes the loop between what happens with the social justice and community and sort of culture building on the one hand, and the development, which is then regulated by the city. And would you just speak a little bit about the potential for that kind of synchronization and support?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you just
Okay.
have to get a little closer to that one.
So the challenge is that investment that needs to be made by the city council. We used to have a neighborhood planner, and that went away, I think, with the Great Recession. We need to create that again, but also have our entire planning team out at these community meetings. The city council has started town halls, and we're going to be participating with that as well. You're right, the connective tissue is our neighborhoods, and we really need to listen to what is happening, because I don't live in Bellama, I don't live on the east side, I don't know, I don't presume to know what it's like to live there, and what are the issues. And so by making an investment in a neighborhood planning program, as part of our implementation plan, I think is critical, but that needs to be defined by the community. Unfortunately, the neighborhood network is not here or around very much anymore, but they were very powerful in the 2010s, and they helped to draft the early neighborhood notification guidelines. And so really trying to get that connective tissue to be involved in what's going on at City Hall and helping make those decisions is a point well made. and something that we need to do. And I'm going to write it down.
I think there was another hand over here. Did you have another hand? Jake? Okay, all right.
So I'll try to make this quick, but you know, and I really want to compliment your presentation, and it's really refreshing to see the city's working on all these things you're talking about, which seem to be at a level somewhere where it's really adaptively happening. But earlier today, when he was talking about Airport Road not having any transportation, it reminded me of something that I wondered what's going on in the city, because we focus on the H-board and everything like that. But the city, to my mind, this growth in the Southwest, it looks unlivable to me. The places that are being built, it doesn't look like there's any place to walk. It doesn't look like, you know, and so I think that some of this stuff has gotten away from us. I kind of feel like you're working as hard as you can with a land use planning department in the city. But on the other hand, it looks like to me that the development out in surrounding the city is just, it's just out of control. Now, I could be completely wrong about that. It's scary. It's scary. I don't know how people live in that kind of environment.
And I hear you when it comes to that. And one of the unique things that we have, one of the unique constraints we have, are those long linear lots that were family compounds. So it was all organized around an acequia. There was agriculture, just like you would see on Canyon Road. Originally, historically, there was an acequia. The agriculture was next to the acequia, and then there were a few homes. And over time, organically, you had those family compounds develop. In phase 2, we need to sort of get back to what that historical knowledge, what the historical lessons, and then allow them and adapt them for modern use. We updated in the Land Development Code allowing, you know, duplexes, triplexes anywhere in the city. And we are, with our updated zoning standards, going to be allowing for more density too, so that you can see that incremental change and allow for, you know, investment within the city and not just on the fringes of the city. And we do need to do something better with the fringes of the city, and I hope that the Land Development Code the updates can make incremental improvements.
Heather, we always talk about how much is on your plate and how glad we are that you're in this position doing the work that you're doing. So I'll start with a big thank you for all you do. My question is about implementation. So, you know, we spent a good part of today, and I was really excited that this was the focus of today, you know, talking about how preservation is beyond our district model. I like to call it an HOA model in Santa Fe, that, you know, that it involves these other neighborhoods, the neighborhood where I live, Midtown, the South Side, all of these things, and things that go far beyond the kind of tangible aspects of preservation and really are about community work. It seems like there's a lot of raw material there, and in the Community Connects report from 2019, that could inform the preservation chapter and perhaps even the heritage preservation plan that would be citywide, that would come out as part of the general planning process. I think there has been that work, there has been that inclusion, there has been that discussion. There's a lot of good material there. But you know, at the same time, we know that, like, in the 2021 Continuity and Connection report, we see a documentation of the negatives of how we actually implement the plan. Like, the 99 plan talked a good game, but we didn't change the zoning code very much at all after it. And we know that, you know, that report shows how, you know, 60+% of the Hispanic families left the East Side. There has been this tremendous displacement. And really, it's a product of exclusionary zoning, exclusionary policies, exclusionary hearings, and all of those things. And I guess my big question for you is, you know, if we're going to write a good plan, and I really hope we do, how do we get to a culture of yes in Santa Fe? a culture of inclusion in terms of practice. And I mean that from everything from the public hearings, like what gets heard and what gets done administratively, to the kind of discussions that seemed very limited this morning that said, oh, well, all affordable housing is going to be done with land leases. And I'm like, oh my God, we have so many ways to do affordable housing. And so it seems to me that it should be an all of the above. I'm wondering how we get there on the implementation side.
That's a lot to think about, I would admit. But we do have a lot of body of work that's been done already. And I'm, going to be assigning to the Historic Districts Review Board to, review and read what happened with that Culture Connects process. And if you want to come speak, please do. I think that's really good work. We need to check, because that was done, pre-COVID, like where we are now. I think that's going to be a really critical piece. But yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just need to make it better. The culture of yes is something that I hear. I was just telling Tom Spray, working with other departments in the city sometimes just drives me crazy. And it's like, we're doing this for the community. It's like getting the e-review, getting ITT to the table, and consider something different. The culture of yes, I have to admit, has to go through all of City Hall. But, we strongly believe in planning and land use and affordable housing. We feel that it's critical that we operate efficiently so that we can, and not have those same arguments happening over and over and over again. So it's a large task, but hopefully some of the clarifications that we can make in the Land Development Code will help us get there more quickly.
Hi. Just get used to the crazy feeling. Stay right in there. 'Cause, during one of the livability series a couple years ago, I think, HomeWise has done a good job with that. I think they've raised the elevation of the conversation with those kind of discussions. There was that whole hey, we built the American West around the car, and so we just blazed Cerritos out to the end of the world, and then we maintain this, low-rise development situation. And I think the feedback from the author they brought in was like, oh, you build it more densely, you build it up higher, and you kind of undo the expansionist mistakes you made that prevented the building a community as you rocked out to the horizon. And so earlier today, Joe Simmons gave some beautiful slides. I don't know if you're here for that. And I made a motion to the room, can we give Joe $1 billion just to do this thing? My very specific question was, so if we're going to do really cool things to Cerritos Road, change the lane, change the striping, these are state roads, but they're in our city limits. It seems like it'll be a real companion piece with the Phase 2 LDC to for the city to say, hey, state, we're changing your road here. We're taking over on the road. We're going to do X to it. What rights does the city have to impose itself upon state roads and say we're changing this because we need to create neighborhood community here?
Well, like in other cases with the county where we haven't worked as well together in the past as we should have been, fortunately, New Mexico Department of Transportation, we actually have DOT ex-employees on our team. Maggie Moore is one of them. Leveraging those connections is important, and DOT is doing a study right now on that portion of Cerritos Road between St. Francis and St. Mike's. So yes, it is a state highway, but I think the DOTs across the country are understanding that their highways are also in urban areas and need to respond well to the urban areas. So you have safe access through, but you're part of a place. And so there is a proposed design, and I would suggest that maybe I can share this with Melanie, but there's a website talking about the proposed designs for additional bike lanes, the reduction of the number of lanes, making it more livable, and of course not having people pull back into Cerritos Road. So there's some work that's being done, but once again, the metrics are different from the city to the state. So how do we find common ground there is going to be really critical. Eric Ani and his team with the MPO, they've been working very collaboratively, as well as our Public Works Department. But I will say, I don't always agree with our traffic engineer. I think traffic engineering is a socialist science, and he would be really upset with me for saying that, because it's based on human behavior. So, and truly, we need to start thinking differently about, you know, highways going through town, and how do we undo all of the urban removal that occurred as part of like the whole west side, as part of St. Francis, and really knitting that community back together. But the good news is that NMDOT is working on it, but we need to nurture that more. Good point.
Just a quick follow-up comment, you know, like,
Miles, do you get the mic?
when I used to, you know, when I used to drive down Cerrillos, when I first moved here in the early 90s, Cerrillos was just, it was a transit corridor. And then just, I think it was about a month ago, or maybe a few months ago, me and my wife driving down Cerrillos, there's all these people walking around. And it used to be like, you know, oh man, I hope that person has someplace to go at night, you know. But no, that's not who's there. There's people walking around Cerrillos. They're going to restaurants. And I think, yeah, the city needs to arise to meet what's happening right before us, to just really galvanize that walkability thing that's happening right now.
Yeah, and Joe's idea about the La Rambla, the Smith store. By the way, I got a phone call. Look, can it be a gym? You know, and I was like, please, no. But you know, this is a great opportunity. So the Christian Brothers sold off that frontage along Cerrillos Road because they needed to fund the Fogelson as well as other, you know, operations with the College of Santa Fe. That was a major disaster because it cut off Midtown to Cerrillos Road, and having that critical connection is really, really important. And so there are more people walking around. I was at Oslo. It was the old Motel 6 on Cerrillos Road has been created, and there's micro apartments that people are living in now, and it's really active. 96% occupied. And I was told by the person who was running it, only about 70% of the people who live there owned a car. So they're going to be expanding to the old Quality Inn where Lulu's Chinese is. They're going to be redoing that and redeveloping that into those micro apartments so that people can live and activate that area, because it does take people to activate that area. And we've gone through an evolution. A lot of those hotels from the 60s really are just sitting there not being used very well. So how can we retool it? And also the companion to that, like you point out very well, is make it livable, make it safe for pedestrians, and really focus on people, not cars.
Any more questions? We have one right here, story. I think we need a really big grant to buy everybody e-bikes.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm on the County Plan Commission. I've had the pleasure of serving twice on city under different mayors. Heather, what do you think we could do? What are opportunities working the city and the county and the state land office, which happens to own multi-hundred-acre parcels along the bypass, the atomic bypass route, which is supposed to be just to get the trucks through, and is experiencing a surprise, lots of development. I would see there's some great opportunities about what we talked about earlier, because you have large parcels that could be assembled. I guess what I'm thinking of is affordability and building complete communities, kind of what Aldea was trying to do, but not for rich people.
One of the untapped resources we have is the Northwest Quadrant. So we've made incremental change when it comes to donating their property to HomeWise for Las Estrellas, as well as for the Housing Authority. I don't know, Romana Beta's group. I think it's the Housing Authority. Yeah, Santa Fe Community Housing Trust. They're going to be doing some redevelopment in there, but we got a lot of pushback. You're right. It's not just about the people who are wealthy. It's people need to live. And you know, people of all income abilities need to be able to live in different parts of town. They don't have to just be shoved to the south side. So although the south side is very special, and I don't want to, say anything bad about the south side because I love going to Los Poblanos, the grocery store. I don't know if it's
El
Poblanos.
Paisano?
Yes, Angel's Bakery is amazing as well. So there's a lot of good things along Airport Road, but the Northwest Quadrant is is an untapped resource. But then I get the phone calls about every 6 months. There's nothing that's going to happen there, is there? We don't want anything. We like our open space, but open space can be something that can live side by side with affordable housing development. So leveraging those partnerships with the state land office, we have access to about 30 acres of land at Meadows and 599. You bring up a good point too. Is that nuclear waste still going through there? And are we defeating the purpose of that nuclear waste? And what are we? So that's something that we need to solve for. But those partnerships are going to. That's quite honestly how we're going to be able to build affordable housing because of costs of construction. The gap is getting to be greater and greater. And just in the past 6 months, we've been trying to get the Lamplighter project going. The cost of construction, the construction costs have gone up by a factor of 50%. So how do you solve for that? And it's really hard to solve for that. And it just takes partnerships. That's the only way we can do it.
Okay, any more questions?
Thank you all for being here. Really
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Heather. Yay. And I know it's been a long day. I appreciate you all hanging in there with us, and thank you all so much for attending. We will be posting the recordings, so if you missed something, I know a lot of you were here during the course of the whole day. But it'd be great if we could distribute them around too, and then I will check into Spanish translations for some, if not all. But and then we'll share resources too. So if you have other resources or things you want us to know about to share with other people, we're going to try and maybe make a little hub on our website too. So please share them away with us. So thank you all. Thank you. Thanks for all the AV. Yay, good job.